Hey guys, welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. It's honestly been forever since I've sat down and filmed a video. I think almost 2 months or something like that. I've been extremely busy with personal things, but it definitely feels good sitting back down and filming a video. If you are new to the channel and you're interested in true crime, crazy and unknown historical events, ghost phenomena, and more, then you've definitely stumbled on the right channel because that is all we discuss. I also traveled to some of the locations that I talk about, like in today's video, so definitely consider subscribing and joining my upcoming adventures. A lot of today's video was actually filmed the other day when I explored the location of the old Spahn Ranch movie set, which, if you're familiar with the Manson family murders, then you know this is where the family called home during the murders. Although there were no structures still standing, I was able to pull up pictures of the area during the time of the family, and it was crazy to see how the area looked today compared to then. Recently, I moved nearby the area where Spahn Ranch was, and one day I was filming a TV show near the road that takes you to the ranch, which made me realize just how close I actually lived to the location, and I made plans immediately to go as soon as possible. Just a side note before we dive into this video, if you don't know, this case is very intense, involving drug abuse and horrific murders. Although I'm not going to go into insane details with the murders themselves, I thought it was still important to disclose that. This case also has a lot of moving parts with lots of names, so I did my best to put it all together as concisely as possible for you to understand. Once used as a Hollywood TV and movie set for family-friendly productions, Spahn Ranch is now remembered for a darker history and is connected to one of America's most notorious crimes. Like I said earlier, those of you who are true crime buffs may recognize the name of this location, but for those of you who don't know, in the late 60s, this location became the home of Charles Manson and his followers, who were referred to as the Manson family. According to articles, the ranch was originally a homestead for farmer J.R. Williams back in 1885. The ranch was passed on to many different owners throughout the years. Lee and Ruth McReynolds eventually bought the land and transformed the... Alright, well, they just started yard work. Yay. Sorry, but I do have to film. This is the only time I have to film. So sorry if that's distracting, but I'll try to drown that out with my talking. Lee and Ruth McReynolds eventually bought the land and transformed the property into a western movie town in an effort to compete with the Iverson Movie Ranch, which was actually just down the street and was where actors John Wayne and Buster Keaton had filmed movies. The timeline varies slightly from article to article. However, around 1948, the property was sold again to rancher George Spahn, hence the name Spahn Ranch, and he continued renting the location to film studios, but as public interest in old westerns dwindled, Spahn had to stay afloat by hosting birthdays and other events such as horseback riding. Fast forwarding a little more to the late 60s, just before living at Spahn Ranch, the family had been living with Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys, in hopes of sparking a music career, but were eventually kicked out of his Santa Barbara cabin after a fallout between the musician and Manson. Shortly after being evicted, Susan Atkins, who was one of Manson's girls, later convicted for the murders the family committed, had discovered Spahn Ranch in 1967 after meeting George Spahn, who was about 80 years old at the time and nearly blind, introducing him to Charles Manson. Manson negotiated with Spahn to let the family live on the property in exchange for upkeep of the property, and the girls of the family were also ordered to tend to Spahn from time to time. Articles were very vague about this, but I think you can connect the dots. They weren't necessarily always assisting him with house chores. But there was one article that I came across that claimed Lynette Frome, another one of Manson's girls, absolutely contested the claim of any sexual activity with Spahn. Manson and Spahn would also have hour-long philosophical debates from time to time, and according to many reports, Spahn really liked the company of the family. But honestly, I think the creepiest thing was, at least due to what we know about the family now, is that the family would also help with the tourists that visited the ranch for different activities such as the horseback riding. In between helping with the upkeep, the family would explore the surrounding hills of the ranch and also use the different set pieces to entertain themselves. One day they'd pretend to be pirates, and the next they would be cowboys and Indians. Especially with the amount of drugs being consumed, there was endless amounts of fun to be had around their new home.
Always is always forever, 'cause one is one is one. Look inside yourself for your father. All is none, all is none, all is one. It's time to draw time from behind you. The illusion has been just a dream. The valley of death and I'll find you. Now is when on a sunshine beam. So bring only your perfection, for their life will surely be. No cold, pain, fear, or hunger. You can't see, you can't see, you can't see.
Life on the ranch first took on a commune feel. However, due to the isolation of the ranch and the lack of clocks, calendars, and even books, mixed with all of the drugs being taken, the family became really reliant on each other, which later fueled the paranoia that sparked the murders. In early 1968, Manson was introduced to the performer turned producer Terry Melcher, who had produced many of the top bands from the 60s, and Manson believed this was his ticket to stardom. Unfortunately for Manson, however, Terry didn't see a spark when he met him, and Melcher never called Manson back with a deal, which infuriated Manson. The following year, in the spring of 1969, Manson and his right-hand man, Tex Watson, who was also a very prominent member of the family, were involved in a drug deal gone bad, which further sparked the family's paranoia, believing that the Black Panthers were out to get them. The Black Panthers were a civil rights group that fought for justice and equal rights for Black Americans during the late 60s, and because of many reasons, including this, tensions were very high in Los Angeles at the time. Quick side note, if you haven't seen the show Aquarius with David Duchovny, then I highly recommend watching it because it does a really good job at showing the tensions that were running rampant during this time. And although it's dramatized, it's really well done mixing history into the drama.
We're special. We're powerful. We can change everything. I'm Charlie Manson.
33 years old, assault, attempted murder, rape. Jesus.
Anyways, sorry for the branch off. Let's get back to the video. Not only was Manson and the family worried that the Black Panthers were after them, but they were also suddenly hanging around some very questionable people. In the late spring, new members of the family now included convicts that the family members had met from their time spent in prison, and also members of the biker gang, the Straight Satans. And this helped fuel more of the hate and paranoia, and also brought more weapons onto the ranch than ever before. Over the course of the summer, these tensions continued to build until the fateful Tate and LaBianca murders. On August 8th, Manson approached Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Linda Kasabian, and Patricia Krenwinkel, and told them that it was time for Helter Skelter, which literally means something is disorderly, but in this context, Manson was referring to a pre-planned plot to incite a race war. Tex was given the orders to drive the girls to 10,050 Cielo Drive, a house in the hills of Los Angeles, and kill everyone there. This wasn't a random house either. This house once was owned by none other than Terry Melcher. However, now it belonged to actress Sharon Tate and her husband, Roman Polanski. And it is believed that Manson knew that Melcher didn't own this property anymore, and was sending a message to him with the murders. However, I personally don't think Manson cared who was at this property. He just hated that house because it was where he felt like his career was ruined. And I believe this is evident in his overall plot to start a war between the races. Furthermore, he told Tex and the girls to write witchy messages on the wall in the victim's blood, in hopes that it would point the finger to the Black Panthers, which this fact alone completely negates the theory that Manson wanted to send a message or a warning to Melcher. The gang arrived at Cielo Drive just after midnight on August 9th, first killing Stephen Parent, which occurred at the front gate of the house. Stephen had been visiting his friend who was the caretaker of the property and who lived in the guest house. After killing him, the gang continued into the house, waking up the ones that were asleep, and gathered Sharon Tate, who was 8 months pregnant at the time, Jay Sebring, Wojtek Frykowski, and Abigail Folger into the living room. When Frykowski asked who they were, Tex responded, "I'm the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's business." And after this, mayhem ensued. By the end of it all, Abigail had been stabbed 28 times, Wojtek 51 times, plus suffered immense head trauma from Watson's gun, which the beating actually broke the gun. Sharon had pleaded with her murderers to let her live long enough to give birth, but to no avail, and she was stabbed 16 times. And Jay was stabbed a total of 7 times. Before they left, Susan Atkins dipped a cloth in Sharon's blood and wrote "pig" on the front door in order to point the finger to the Black Panthers. The following night, Manson took the 4 murderers plus Leslie Van Houten and Clem Grogan for a drive, and according to some of the family members, Manson was not happy with the chaos of the previous night. He told Linda Kasabian to drive to 3301 Waverly Drive in Los Angeles, which was located next door to a house where Manson and some of his family members had attended a party the year before. And this house belonged to Lino and Rosemary LaBianca. Watson and Manson went up the driveway and into the house before anyone else, first tying up the couple, then putting pillowcases over their head and cinching them down with telephone cords, before bringing Krenwinkel and Van Houten into the house. Manson left the 3 of them to handle the LaBiancas, while he ordered Kasabian, Atkins, and Grogan to come with him to a separate house down in Venice Beach. Back at the LaBiancas, the 3 murderers separated the couple, putting Rosemary in the bedroom, and Watson handled Lino in the living room. In a statement given by Tex Watson, he claimed that while he was in the middle of attacking Lino, he heard a scuffle in the room and found Rosemary whipping the 2 girls with the cord that was around her neck, but Watson tackled her and stabbed her before returning to attack Lino. Before the attacks began, Watson had complained that his weapon wasn't good enough the night before, so Manson gave him a bayonet to use that night instead, while the girls used knives from the LaBianca's kitchen. Once the murders were done, Lino LaBianca was stabbed a total of 12 times, all over his body, and the word "war" was carved into his abdomen. He also had a fork and a knife left lodged in his body. Rosemary LaBianca was stabbed a total of 41 times, however, only 8 were fatal. Like the night before, the murderers wrote messages in the victim's blood. "Rise" and "Death to Pigs" were found sprawled on various walls around the house, and "Helter Skelter" was written on the fridge door, misspelled, but I could not find whether that was an accident or intentional. Meanwhile, Manson dropped off the 3 other family members off at the house of the Lebanese actor Saladin Nader, and then drove back to Spahn Ranch, literally expecting the 6 murderers to hitchhike home after committing these murders, because that's not going to raise any suspicions at all. According to Kasabian, Manson wanted them to murder Nader that night as well. However, she claims that she purposefully knocked on the wrong door to spare his life. When the occupant of the apartment opened the door, she pretended like they just had the wrong address for a friend's apartment and left, but not before Susan Atkins pooped in the stairwell. Like I said earlier in the video, there isn't really any remnants of the ranch aside from a few bricks and concrete slabs here and there. The ranch burned down in a wildfire very shortly after the murders occurred in the midst of the trials. Although there are no structures, the land is definitely saturated in history. I was honestly able to find most of the landmarks pretty easily, which I was really shocked about because throughout my research, it seemed really tricky to find these locations. Don't get me wrong, it had its challenges to get to because there's no designated signs pointing you the right direction, almost like the area's trying to stay hidden and forgotten about. As you head into the trees, we came across this rock face with a bunch of carvings including Manson's name, although I'm not positive if this is from the family or just other visitors like myself. The family had nicknames for each other, and we did see some names carved into the rock like Fox, which I believe might be one of the followers' nicknames, but I could be wrong. Manson. It says Manson. Yeah. As you continue down the path, there's tons of poison oak, so my husband decided to stay back with our dog, and my friend and I continued to search. Almost immediately, we found the Manson family cave, which became infamous after the Lifetime article depicting the family sitting in the cave came out. It was honestly surreal being there, and although it was a real serene place, there was definitely an eeriness that lingered in the air, even after all of these years. We explored down the stream a little bit, trying to find more remnants of the family, such as a rusted car. After exploring the cave and river area, we headed back up to the road and walked down a little further to another little opening. After walking through some of the trees, it brought us to what looks like a normal barren field, but this was Spahn Ranch. The very place that the Manson family called home from 1967 until they fled to Death Valley after the murders in hopes to hide out.
Crazy to think about.
However, they didn't flee because they believed the police were onto them. Nope, they fled because they believed they had successfully started the race war, and they wanted to wait it out in Death Valley, where they would emerge after the war, and black people had defeated the white man. Further, Manson believed that he would emerge as a savior, and would be able to convince the black man that he was the chosen one to rule this new world. Like I said a little earlier, it was honestly so surreal standing here, and I definitely found myself picturing what it was like all those years ago, thinking about what actually went down here. The energy can definitely still be felt here, and I believe it will always hold that stagnant energy forevermore. But that is going to do it for today's video. For today, I did just focus on the murders and some of the history. However, if you would like me to do another video that dives more in depth of the trials, I would love to make one. I just felt like this video would already be too long altogether if I covered the trials as well. The Manson family murders is one of the most well-known true crime cases of the century, so chances are many of you already know the crazy moments of the trial. But with true crime, there's always new things to discover or learn from a case, so definitely let me know in the comments below if you want me to do a video covering that. If you learned anything or just enjoyed this video, please give it a like to let myself know and the YouTube gods know. Finally, if you did enjoy this video and you want to see more of my content, please consider subscribing to the channel and be sure to turn on post notifications so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos and adventures. But as always, I appreciate any and all support, and I will see you in my next video.
Is one, is one, is one. Inside yourself for your father. All is none, all is none, all is one. It's time to talk time from behind you. The illusion has been just a dream. The valley of death and I'll find you. Now is when on a sunshine beam.